The drive home would be worse than anything I had already survived. So I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, my heart hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it from outside the car. And that's when I saw the motorcycles pull in, a whole line of them, engines growling like thunder rolling across the pavement, leather vests, gray beards, the kind of men most people cross the street to avoid. And one of them, a broad-shouldered man with silver in his hair and a patch that read, Road Guardians on his back, happened to glance toward our car while he screwed his gas cap shut. And something in me, some last flicker of hope, made me lift my hand slowly to my chest, tuck my thumb into my palm, and fold my fingers down over it. The same signal I had seen once in a video shared online, a signal quietly taught to bartenders and hairdressers, and anyone who might notice a woman in trouble, but couldn't ask, "Are you okay?" out loud. Today I'm going to tell you the story of a woman named Claire Bennett, and if you don't believe silence can scream louder than any shout, this story will change your mind, because I never said a single word, and yet a stranger heard me anyway. My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old, and 2 years ago I was sitting in the passenger seat of a car outside a gas station off a quiet interstate, trapped in a marriage that had turned into a cage, and on that particular night my husband had pulled over to fill the tank, glancing back at me every few seconds, like a warden checking on a prisoner, and I knew if I said one wrong word, if I so much as reached for the door handle, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness. True stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The man didn't rush over. He didn't point. He didn't do anything that might have tipped off my husband, who was still standing by the pump with his back half turned. Instead, he calmly walked into the gas station store, like he was just grabbing a coffee, and I watched through the window as he said something to the young cashier behind the counter. Quiet, unhurried, and she picked up the phone, and for a moment I thought maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe he hadn't understood at all. Maybe I had just made a fool of myself signaling into empty air, and the fear of being wrong was almost worse than the fear of being right. Because if my husband caught me trying to get help and nothing came of it, I didn't know what would happen when we got home. But then the motorcycle man walked back outside, not toward me, not even glancing at our car again. And instead he strolled over to two of his friends, and I held my hand there against the window glass for just 3 seconds before lowering it back into my lap, praying, absolutely praying, that he hadn't noticed, and that somehow, impossibly, a stranger had. If this story is already making your chest tighten, that's exactly how I felt sitting in that car, and I promise you the ending is worth staying for. So if you believe that ordinary people can become someone's miracle, go ahead and hit subscribe on Kindness. True stories right now. Because stories like mine deserve to be told, and shared, and remembered. My husband finished fueling the car and climbed back in, and for a horrible second, I thought we would simply drive away, and this would be the end of it. A moment of almost rescue that slipped through my fingers. But as he started the engine, one of the men, not the one who'd first noticed me, walked casually toward our car and knocked on my husband's window, asking in the friendliest voice imaginable if he could take a look at our back tire. Said he'd noticed it looked low on air, and didn't want us driving off on a highway with a slow leak, and my husband, annoyed but unwilling to make a scene in front of 4 large men in leather vests, stepped out to check, and the moment his door shut behind him, the silver-haired man appeared at my window, crouched low so only I could see him, and said just 4 words. "Are you safe right now?" And I shook my head, tears finally breaking free after what felt like hours of holding them back. And he said, "Can you get out?" And I nodded, and the 3 of them began talking near the air pump like old men discussing the weather. Except I noticed one of them kept his eyes on our car the entire time without ever seeming to look directly at it. The way you learn to watch something out of the corner of your eye when you don't want to be caught watching. And I realized then that he hadn't misunderstood my signal at all. He had understood it completely, and he was simply waiting, patient as stone, for the right moment, because rushing and recklessly could have gotten me hurt worse, and somehow, in the middle of the worst night of my life, that patience felt like the safest thing I had ever witnessed. The police arrived within minutes, and by the time they did, my husband had realized something was wrong. But by then, it was already too late for him to do anything about it, because 5 bikers stood between him and that store entrance, arms crossed, saying nothing, needing to say nothing. And when an officer finally walked me to a patrol car, the silver-haired man, whose name I would later learn was Walter, 61 years old, a retired mechanic who rode with a group that had, without me ever knowing it existed, spent years training themselves and their local chapters to recognize exactly the kind of silent signal I had given that night, came over and told me quietly that I had done the hardest part already, that all he did was pay attention. And I have thought about those words every single day since. Because sometimes, the difference between a tragedy and a rescue isn't heroism in the way we imagine it, capes and speeches and dramatic declarations. And in less than a minute, while two of the other men kept my husband occupied with talk of tire pressure and treads, I was walking, then running, toward the gas station store, where the cashier had already called the police. And I remember collapsing against the counter, shaking so hard I could barely stand. And the cashier, a young woman who couldn't have been older than 20, wrapped her arms around me and just held on, telling me I was safe now, that help was coming. And outside I could hear the low rumble of motorcycle engines still idling, a wall of sound and steel between me and the car I had spent 3 years afraid of. Sometimes, it's just one person choosing to actually look at a stranger and take a folded hand seriously instead of looking away. If you've made it this far into my story, I want you to know that the small gesture I made that night, one that took less than 3 seconds, is something anyone can learn, and more importantly, anyone can be the one who notices it. So if this story moved you even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to see it, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories, because kindness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a biker crouched by a car window, asking 4 quiet words that saved a life. It took months to rebuild myself after that night. Therapy twice a week, nights where I still flinched at the sound of a car door closing too hard. But I also found something I hadn't expected. A kind of family in the most unlikely place. Because Walter and his group checked in on me for over a year afterward. Sometimes just a text asking how I was doing. Sometimes showing up at a community fundraiser I had started for other women, learning about that same silent signal. And slowly, the men I had once been taught to fear, because of the leather, and the noise and the tattoos, became some of the steadiest, gentlest people in my life. Proof that courage doesn't always look the way we expect it to, and that sometimes the person who saves you is the one everybody else assumes is the danger. Today, 2 years later, I run workshops in community centers, teaching that same hand signal to anyone willing to learn it, because you never know when a stranger might be sitting 3 feet away from you, silently asking for the one thing they cannot say out loud. And if there's one thing I hope you take from my story tonight, it's this: pay attention to the people around you, because you might be the only one who notices. And that noticing might just save a life. If you believe in kindness the way Walter and his friends showed it to me that night, then please, like this video, share it with someone, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories, because every share means this story, and that signal, reaches one more person who might need it someday. And that is how kindness spreads. One quiet gesture, one person willing to see it, at a time.